I'm Debbie Peterson, and this is Corruption Chronicles, stories of everyday people who fix corruption in their local communities. And today we have someone of titanic proportions with us. L.J. Stead's distant ancestor was an investigative journalist in Great Britain and a publisher, and he was one of the first people to investigate child sex trafficking. But today we're going to talk about something different. Maybe we'll talk about those other topics with LJ's family in the next few weeks to come. Today we're going to talk about what LJ did, what he and his fiance did when they found themselves with a lot of time on their hands during the pandemic. So LJ, talk us through it. You're talking about Watts, California, is that right?
Yeah, I had an interesting experience. Not that I think everybody had interesting experiences during COVID and the coronavirus and the pandemic and the what to do and how to change your life, or how your life just changed itself during those times. I had recently exited a business that was a health and tech company that had landed me in LA. I originally am from Minnesota, and I kind of went on this journey where originally we were working out of this soup kitchen called the Midnight Mission down in Skid Row, downtown Los Angeles. And
now, is that with your business? Was that with your business? Were you in the soup kitchen with your business, or was it after you exited the business?
After I exited, I found myself having just more time on my hands, and I was still young and interested in learning more about life. And I'm like, I have all of the entertainment elements of life in Los Angeles was done. There wasn't a lot of things that you were even able to do. So my mind went to, okay, if I can't have fun, let's serve and provide our time into this space where when there's chaos going on and your body is healthy and your mind is clear, you should probably push it into an environment of serving during that time. So we started to be at the Midnight Mission. They ended up they had to shut down the volunteerism at that space because the governor and the mayor and some city council members wanted to shut down volunteering in places like that. Even we were serving 1,200 meals a day. So,
oh, wow.
And what was crazy within that, 2.5 months that I was in that space, it really helped me realize, one, I showed up every single day, 5 days a week, sometimes 6. And I went from being like just the first volunteer there to now kind of like having some level of managerial duties. Within probably a month, I was showing people their volunteers on the first day, like around and helping them with their tasks and getting them prepared for our shift and doing all that. And I also realized that it usually was only a collection of about 5 of us that was there on a daily basis, which it would sometimes influx to like 20, and then would go down to, there was days where there was only like 2 or 3 of us trying to serve all these meals. And I went, well, if that's what was going on when everybody had to work from home, nobody could go into the office, a lot of people had been laid off. Most Americans and a lot of people like my age had a lot of time on their hands. If this is a period of time that we have a lot of time on our hands, and that's the only volunteerism that I was experiencing at the largest soup kitchen in Los Angeles County, what is really going on here?
Where is everybody?
So myself and my fiance were like pretty distraught that we no longer could serve there because of the new restrictions. And we ended up
Can I ask you something, LJ? Let me interrupt you for a second.
Yeah.
Maybe you're going to go there. But what happened to the 1,200 people? Where did they eat when you closed down when the governor closed down the soup kitchen?
So there was a staff at the Midnight Mission, which is an awesome staff. They're so courageous. They're forward thinking. They're continuing to just work with what's available, whether it's the food that was delivered that day or the volunteers that they have available. So there's a larger staff of that's helping with the drug and alcohol program. And what they really try to do is, it sounds like they try to transition a lot of the individuals that were in the drug and alcohol program to really start volunteering more regularly to serve
Oh.
those meals. So from my understanding, the meals didn't get shut down, but they did the best they could with what they had with the people that were on site. So they really tried to just like internalize their structure to make that happen. But I'm sure it was a brutal transition with
Oh, yeah.
just being able to do that.
But brilliant. It's necessity is the mother of invention. And it reminds me of a conversation I had with a Vietnam vet. In fact, it was a Toastmaster speech he gave, and I haven't forgotten it. It was years ago. But he said the one thing he learned when he was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam, when the helicopter crashed, is to work with what you've got. It
Yeah.
sounds like that's what you did. So I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead with the rest of your story about what you and your fiance did next.
So what we transitioned to do is we said, like, where can we serve? Like, what can we help? And we found this place called the Watts Empowerment Center that kept its doors open. They were doing like farmers markets on a Wednesday and once a week. So I randomly saw like one of my friends, like kind of on social media, like someone that I had met probably like 3 years ago down on social at one of these farmers markets. And I honestly like peruse like every like week or two, I would be like, what could we do? I was always just kind of keep my mind open for what's open to be able to serve some of our time. And I honestly was only looking for something that would maybe be like kind of like once a week, or maybe even just like once a month, that we would go to and just like allow our energy to be able to fill a space and hopefully shorten a gap for something. And so we went down to this farmer's market, and my fiance is a career educator. She's educated like from Harvard within their education program. And so she's big on building like career opportunities. She likes that career advancement from high school to college, and then that continuing ed after, even linking you after grad school. So that real like career progression. They were just starting to do their outdoor learning hub at the time. So school was starting. We were probably like in kind of mid-August. School was starting the next week, and they're like, "Hey, you guys seem like you have some time and energy. Would you want to help us with the outdoor learning hub, where kids were going to be accessing their school, like in this kind of like this outdoor area with their laptops?" Because of her expertise, we found ourselves really running that environment pretty quickly.
Let me stop you again here. I'm really curious. So we're talking about kids in Watts,
Yep.
which is it's an area with a lot of poverty and deprivation.
Yeah.
And yet the kids all had laptops. Is that right? They had laptops. How did they get laptops?
Yeah. So to give you a little perspective on like where we were serving specifically in Imperial Courts. And it's the poorest and youngest housing project in Los Angeles County, which so it's interesting. I think the average age is something like 21 years old. And so what that means is there's a lot of young parents and a lot of little kids. And so in any house, you could see, like 7 kids in a, kind of like 1 to 2 bedroom place. They do have some 5 bedrooms within that housing project. But LAUSD did provide laptops and then these little hotspots, these little like AT&T hotspots to every kid. But the hotspots would like break a lot. And also like a lot of the kids, if you think, okay, let's like just give everybody a laptop and you'll do your work from home. If you have 7 kids in a single household, where do you expect all of these children to be in those spaces? And being
7 different teachers, 7 different classes. Yeah. And poor mom and dad or grandma or whoever extended family is staying with them.
Right.
Crazy.
And I was always having conversations with my older sister who she just has like a lovely family. They have a beautiful house. they have 3 kids, so it's like just enough to be crazy, but at the same time it's like still containable. And she only had 2 children that were actually in school. One was in basically like a preschool, the other one I believe was in kindergarten. And with her, she was still pulling out her hair every single day because she's like, this is chaos. But at the same time, she even like, they set up like a little corner in their house that was like, this is the school section, right? Like with like a little desk, and like, this is where the kids put their headphones on, to be able to create that like working environment. And even with a stay-at-home mom that's fully engaged and has all time and love and resources to be able to create that, and space to be able to create peace, that was still difficult. So to think about what a lot of these kids were going through, it wasn't like difficult, it was impossible.
Yeah.
And so luckily the Watts Empowerment Center did a really quick kind of shift of actually even I think 2K Sports, which is a gaming company, they provided a bunch of tablet, I think they were MacBook, or the Mac tablets
Wow.
to the center, and they had 5G already like equipped on them. So each kid could come in and we had 40 tablets that you could get.
Oh,
And then
wow.
if we had more students than that, you would just use your little your laptop that was given by LAUSD. But it was crazy because I'm like relatively tech savvy. Like I'm building a media company, I'm podcasting all the time. I've tinkered with all of this equipment my entire life. And it was still a disaster of learning how to get all the kids on Zoom, get all of their passcodes like together, make sure that they're in the right class, learning how to navigate Schoolology. And the teachers were all doing that like at the same time. So it was such a weird jumpstart because it felt as though LAUSD had months to plan for this. And the planning didn't really start till the week that it began. And so we just started to host kids for these outdoor learning park. And because we were like outsiders from this, coming into this community, we really only knew like the little kids for a while. Like first, like we would kind of know the first graders, and then like the third graders were kind of cool with us. And I remember the first day that I met a 5th grader, and I was like, oh, like some of the older kids are liking me. And not till about probably about 6 to 9 months of serving in this space did I have a 7th grader come up and start talking to me. I'm like, wow, like I actually know a middle schooler. Because there's levels of distrust of individuals coming into these spaces with ill intent, and sometimes just sitting and doing it a little bit for Instagram posts to be able to show that, hey, I'm here to care more to your followers than you are to the kid. And so we found ourselves just really like just being in this space, every 5 to 6 days a week we were with these kiddos and helping them on Zoom and battling with the stresses of heat and rain and computers not working and the internet not working. And even like there was a kindergarten teacher that got mad at my fiance one day, and she's like, why can't your kid focus over there?
For heaven's sakes.
And we're like, well, it's 80 degrees out, the sun's beaming. We kept on like going to Walmart, and like luckily the Watts Empowerment Center, and then also this organization called Children Mending Hearts was doing such a good job of financing this operation, right? So buying new tents or kind of canopies, and continuing to kind of alter how we could move them around when the sun was going. But it's like, well, we have 30 kids over here today, and this child is 6 months into Zoom, and it's difficult. It's
And so all those organizations that were helping you, they were nonprofit organizations?
Yeah, they were nonprofit. Yep. There was no,
And you were doing this. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
The only governmental resource was the laptops provided by LAUSD.
And you were doing this outside in a park, is that right?
It was kind of this like courtyard area outside of one of the buildings in Watts. So it
So
was an
kids,
enclosed, and my fiance and the person that runs Children Under House made it like really cute. Like it felt
uh-huh.
like an outdoor learning park for kids.
Hmm.
It wasn't perfect, but it looked cute enough.
So this was for kids in a housing project where, or a neighborhood where there were many, many, many kids in a family often. And so this was an opportunity for them to get out of the house and go ahead and connect with their school and do their schoolwork. Is that right? Is that what you
Yeah.
did it? Uh-huh.
And so like, we grew to like maybe I ended up starting to as we kind of expanded, I started working with kids inside of the Watts Empowerment Center, and Elof stayed over at this place with the learning park, which were basically right next door to each other as we kind of expanded. And so
So
I
tell
kind of
me
took up
what you keep mentioning the Watson Parliament Center. I love the word parliament because it sounds
no,
to me like you are
empowerment.
communicating. Oh, empowerment.
Yeah.
Oh, that's even better.
Yeah.
So the Watson Empowerment Center, and
Mhm.
that was that a public space or was it a nonprofit space or how what's the Watson Empowerment Center?
So the Watts Empowerment Center is it's ran by this organization called Red Eye, but they basically are like the leaseholder on a Hackla owned property. So
Okay.
Hackla,
Okay, I have to give you one warning on my podcast. There's only one cuss word you can't use, or only one kind of cuss word you can't use, and that is acronyms. No acronyms. We will not have acronyms. So if you say HASLA, you have to tell us what's HASLA so we know what the heck you're talking about.
okay, so Hackla is the Housing Authority of Los Angeles.
Okay.
So however that acronym lays itself out, but that's
Okay.
what it is. It's the Housing Authority of
Okay.
Los Angeles, which it's funded through HUD federally.
You mean
And
the
then
Housing and Urban Development?
yes, thank you. Yes, I'm still swearing on your podcast. My apologies.
Yep, no swearing.
and and then it's basically like those funds are directed through the Housing Authority of Los Angeles.
Okay.
And
So
that'll
the
kind of
feds
get,
give the money to the county and the county feeds it back down to the kiddos,
in theory, yes.
in
In theory,
theory.
yes. And so
Okay.
and this will all kind of be, we're going to get back to how federally funded property ends up making this a little bit more difficult and murky and corrupt as we kind of linger. So through this, we met a lot of the kids. And through meeting a lot of the kids over a period of time, we started to get introduced to parents. And through getting
Oh,
into
wow.
so then through getting introduced to parents, that's when we could start to like enact some of our resources. I'm an entrepreneur. I love helping people with business plans and logos
Mhm.
and starting your
Yeah,
business and
yeah.
helping you prepare yourself for funding. And my fiance, she loves getting you prepared for career opportunities, right? Like getting your
Mhm.
resume ready, doing interview prep, understanding really where you are, where you can get financially, like how can you fight for more income, and where is your
Mhm.
current education, and what jobs are you actually like available for. And so those were the programs that we started. We're like, okay, as the school year started to slow down, we said we want to continue to high five the 2-year-olds and to be there. And we started a boys program, and she started a Queens Club with this little and also the Dynasty Pack, which was a dance crew for some of the girls and boys that they would do crumping, which is it started in Watts. Crumping started in Watts through this guy Tommy the Clown. And so all the kids like love, like culturally, like crumping is like a huge identity marker of dance in that space. So through that, we're like, you know what? We want to stay here, right? We survived a school year, but we also realized in order to make this possible, we want to build some programs. We want to start a nonprofit. We started a nonprofit called Love Wins. And we started to just like work through like individuals that we could assist in different like spaces. And she got identified by an organization called the Change Reaction pretty quickly once the school year ended, where they do emergency grants. So a mom who's dealing with foster care or and needs a couch to be able to make sure that she can continue to house her kids, or a father that just lost their job because of COVID and could potentially lose their house if they don't have another means of income. They'll help you kind of like fill that gap, whether it's rent, whether it's your car insurance, it's your car note. They do these little emergency gaps. So we found ourselves doing a lot of like career opportunity stuff. And I found myself doing some entrepreneurship things. So like even in May, we have an entrepreneurship pitch night where the winner of that pitch night gets $25,000 to be able to help grow their business.
Wow.
And that's through a partnership collaboration with End Poverty, Make Trillions, which is providing those funds for that night. So I guess just to help you kind of the synopsis of where we got, we really found ourselves like having a lot of deep conversations with community members. Half of our board is people that actually live in Imperial Courts Watts on Love Win. So that's our directors that are telling us like, hey, this is what's going on. Through that process, we started to know a lot of these kids, know the way that the project is run. One of the really dirty things that we learned was, so if your kid is starting to like shoot off fireworks or throw rocks or have encounters with the police, or maybe even potentially hanging out with individuals that could be potential gang members, or maybe even getting involved in those activities, right? A lot of the parents will then take that kid off the lease, the young boys. And why would they do that? Because there's actually a strike policy that if your kid gets caught doing fireworks, you now could lose your lease.
Fireworks?
Yes, we have a parent
like
actually
the 4th of July, New Year's Day. Okay,
yeah,
New Year's Eve.
Yeah, I mean, July is brutal with kids getting having encounters with the police because of, you know, they get some fireworks and they're shooting them and stuff like that. A lot of the stuff's being kids. But then there is elements of the community that it's like, there is gun violence in these spaces. There is gangs, there is drugs. That's all real. But the problem is everyone knows that, right? Like these are things that you've heard about the projects. Unfortunately, we treat every child as if they are a part of that. But really what's more important, that every child is actually affected by that. And one of the pressures that the cops put on these kids because of their general broad sweeping thought that every child is that, then on the other hand, you get this kind of broad sweeping universal thought from a lot of the Black boys that cops aren't in their favor. Cops aren't safe. And so now I want to kind of get to where I am with like, as a person, right? I'm this Midwestern guy. I always kind of lead a little bit like Republican. I call myself conservative, but I'm just kind of a little bit on the right. And I find I'm like, whoa, this policing issue that we've discussed is brutal.
And real. It's real. It's
so authentically real when you get in these scenarios. It is undeniable. And so
even for a Republican, you couldn't deny it. I'll say a leaning towards Republican, you couldn't deny it.
Yeah, and
it was in your face.
Like it's so glaring in your face, and you know, it really seemed like a conservative issue in the sense that the government shouldn't get in the way of your freedoms, right? Like that's what conservatives hate the most. Speaking as a conservative, I'm like, when the government impedes on my ability to act the way that I know is right, whether I want to start a business, whether I want to walk down the street and do nothing all day, anything, like and as long as you're like not doing anything that's impeding in other people's rights, you should be able to live freely. And there's a protocol for, even if you think I'm doing something wrong, there's still a protocol for how you discover that. You know, there's certain laws.
You ask the question. assumption. You don't make the assumption.
Yeah, you can't just
Right.
run up on
You
me and say,
investigate before you assume.
yeah, you
Yeah.
can't just say, you look suspicious, blah, blah, blah. So where I was getting to with these kids, a lot of the boys have been taken off of the leases because the parents can take their leases away at any moment's time, even if the kid has a best friend that's involved in the gang and they're not, because they're involved in that group. And as we've all known growing up, I grew up in a primarily white, like kind of suburb type of thing in Rochester, Minnesota. I hung out with kids that didn't make it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I knew kids who were involved with gangs, and we went to church together, and the kids, and one of them got killed. But yeah, and I came from the same very sheltered background.
And so like, and I'm sure, Debbie, I don't know how your relationship with your parents were, but like my parents would be like, hey, like LJ, I see that those kids are smoking like a lot of pot. Do you want to like do sports and you want to have like a life? Like, I'm still going to let you hang out with those kids, but just so you know, like, you can't like be involved in everything. And I was like, I get it, mom and dad. I have these desires that I want for my life. I'm not interested in their interactions with the way that these kids were like messing around with drugs, where I had some friends kind of get into like heroin and all that stuff. But I loved those friends and still do love those friends. And I never wanted to stop being able to like see them. I ended up seeing them less over time because of different life choices, but still, like, if you would have looked at me and said, well, LJ, your friends are messing around with all these drugs, you are now a criminal. That's crazy. And so, like, honestly, all of these boys are treated that way. And so what happens is that because they get removed from their parents' lease, the cops can then now deem them as trespassing anytime that they're in that space. And it gets chaotic at that point because any boy can get taken away for trespassing, and they pressure, even if they're on a parent's lease, they assume it so much that they're not, that they can basically like take this kid in, arrest them, book them, and then that booking starts going on the parent's lease record. And then at some point, the parents do have to let the kid go off of their lease. And then the cops can actually like have a severe interaction with, we'll take the kid away.
Oh, wow.
So the corruption in these spaces.
So the parents take the kid off the lease because that affects their ability to have housing. And then because they don't have the kid on their lease, the police can take the kid.
Yes.
Is that right? Oh,
yes.
For heaven's sakes.
Yes.
Oh,
and that is
what a crop.
That is like just one example of the very brutal trickle effect of the way that institutions abuse laws, right? Like, and now why?
Now, LJ, would you call that systemic racism? Would you say that's an example of systemic racism? Because there's such a big argument in my county about it. First, no, it didn't exist, and now I think the police authorities are admitting, yeah, it does exist, after they got so much pushback and maybe came to understand it. But would you say is that an example of systemic racism?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's absolutely an example of how, yes. So I would say yes, that's systemic racism. And I think the conversation of systemic racism is getting too political in some of these instances. I'm going to go get a Red Bull really quick as we get into this conversation.
Okay.
1 second.
I guess you'll edit this bit out.
Yes, I can edit it out. So I absolutely think that is systemic racism, right? In the way that laws can work against a group in this country. I guess to brush quickly on the idea, the one issue I ever have with like this totally broad sweeping idea of systemic racism, so this is me becoming more right, is saying I don't broadly think that this country was built for white people. But because using our laws accordingly, it should be able to be freeing for a beautiful celebration of diversity. And
it should.
And luckily, demographically, this country has created more diversity, not only here, but the example that it's set has created the ability for diversity in multitudes of other spaces, and it has fought for that ability. Now, but there is a huge however when we talk about the fact that I do believe that this country was built for everybody on its inception, and I believe that its future is also continuing to be created for everyone as long as we're willing to continue to push. Now, the huge however, which now I slide much more left, is the fact that there's ways to be able to manipulate laws to allow these crises to happen. And so in a neighborhood that is actually predominantly Hispanic, it's probably 80-20, where there's 80% Hispanic individuals and 20% Black. These laws are only used and enacted to hurt the young Black men. And now what's tough is, so I imagine if I were to just like theorize of why the trespassing laws are in place, is the fact that because there is high level of gang violence, you would in theory want the ability to, like, if you suspected somebody of being in the wrong neighborhood, in order to protect an individual within the neighborhood that you thought there was wrongdoing potentially taking place, you would want to go, oh, are you trespassing? I can check you to protect this neighborhood. So even the most empathetic laws can be used really negatively because the cops in these neighborhoods, there's cameras on everything. And for some reason, they can't solve a case. And so the neighborhoods that are having gun violence are about a half mile from each other. And so, and all three of these neighborhoods are have cameras everywhere. So if there's cameras everywhere, it would be so obvious to see the individuals walk out of the houses that they walked out of into the car that they drive into, and you could backtrack it, because then that car stops in an opposing neighborhood, shoots an individual or shoots at, or has an encounter or has a drive-by, whatever you want to call it. That car is then going to drive back to where it started. And it should be wildly obvious of, oh, it was these individuals that came from there that infected harm into this person, and then they came back to that side. For the cops to not be able to solve any case of gun violence when it comes to the gang violence in these neighborhoods, it makes me immediately trigger all of the warning whistles of why I'm on this podcast right now, which is corruption. It just feels sleazy. It feels unhuman. It's detrimental, and it's sad that
why do you think they can't? What's your theory as to why they can't, or what do you know about why they can't solve violence? Are they afraid? Are they afraid of retaliation? Do they just not care? Are they understaffed? What's the story?
I think that, and I don't know why, because usually anytime that there's corruption, I would say follow the money, right? So I don't know how structurally the money works in scenarios like this, but I know one thing. When we were serving this community and there would be marches of 100,000 people on Hollywood Boulevard, there was probably 3 people volunteering that day inside of this community, which is the poorest and youngest housing project in Los Angeles County. So there's $1 trillion warfare politically happening over the top of this community about Black lives and about police corruption and about programming and about foster youth and about single mothers and about wage gaps and about the way that diversity is negatively impacting the way that we're negatively impacting diverse groups in America, right?
Yeah.
So the empathetic taxpayer in Los Angeles County is cheering on, going, we want our taxes to pay for these gaps. We have deep desire. Like, people aren't fighting to be Democratic voting base because they want better roads. They might want infrastructure changes. I get that. But really what they are hoping as a Democratic voter is that they hope that the government can be deploy their empathy, right? Like, you hope that you're like, I am willing to pay my government extra dollars in order to deploy empathy and structural growth spaces and programmings and initiatives to be able to promote dollars, hope, wealth, and health for the most underserved communities.
Right. Because we all win when we do that. Everybody's better off. We have less crime. We have more money. The pie gets bigger. Everybody, that's a win-win if that's where the money goes and if that's how it's deployed.
So as a Minnesotan that like leans a little bit right, as I've discussed, I went, okay, I'm in like one of the most sympathetic counties, LA County, with one of the largest tax bases in the world, with a voting population that deeply desires these dollars to go towards this community I'm serving, the poorest and the youngest population in LA County. There should be vibrant programs.
It should work.
All I'm thinking is, if the dollars are going anywhere, everybody up in Hollywood Hills would hope the dollars are going here, I would imagine. Because if there's 100,000 people on Hollywood Boulevard saying, we need to love and care for and protect our Black brothers and sisters from the disasters that are being encountered by police and the structural systemic racism that's happening inside of our communities, this is where you would start.
So that's the first thing. You're wondering, why don't they ever convict any criminals? Is it they never do, or does it take a long time?
Well,
never is a silly word.
That's
another cuss word.
What's funny is, so they don't find these individuals within the time period that's necessary. They're convicting kids all the time. So going back to like a HUD property, because it's HUD financed, which the housing of urban development, right?
Yeah, federally financed. Yeah.
Because weed is federally illegal.
Oh, here we go again. Yeah.
It's you cannot smoke weed inside of the projects. It's an offense. So where it's legal every other place in Los Angeles, it's illegal on the 14
in your
housing
home.
On the 14 housing sites. And because your front and back door, even though you have like this kind of like grass area that looks like it's yours, because you're paying a subsidized rent, you're like this looks like it's your backyard. It's public property. So you can get imprisoned for being in possession of any level of marijuana. The smallest joint can imprison you. And then you can be jailed for public intoxication with open container, even if you have a beer in your backyard.
And they do that? Do the police actually do that?
All the time. So for example, just as recently as within the last 2 weeks, the communities call the family gathering after a funeral called a repass. That's just what the kind of after funeral family gathering is called. And there's 498 housing units in Imperial Courts. And as I've said, there's probably, I would say at least probably like at least 5 people in every single household. That's a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
And these are intergenerational households. So grandma's there, everyone's there. There's a lot of death in these communities just based on numbers. Not even when we're talking about like violent death. I'm just talking about just death in general. Like there's a lot of grandmas that are grandfathers and grandmas that are passing away. So the cops at any point, if there's an uncle with a beer or an uncle with a joint, or they storm these repasses, these funerals.
Oh no.
And will put all the men and arrest men for this. And one of the officers within the last 2 weeks said, this guy says, I don't even believe you all are dying so much. And
oh boy.
with the pretense of saying he believed that they were faking the funeral to be able to have a party. Like when you are in that mindset, there's 12, and I'm going to swear quick, CSP officers, which are community safety partnership officers that are dedicated to this specific housing development. The community safety partnership was developed about 10 years ago, I think 8, 10, something around there, to be able to be this new transitional type of policing, where it was police with a budget to be able to do programming, and they're individually promoted officers to be able to build better relationships with community members. When an individual who has a sworn oath to be able to protect and serve, while a community member is grieving with all of their family members, they go, I don't even believe y'all are dying so much. Where like that person if like that's as if I was an accountant and I told the salespeople, I know we had a lot of sales last month, but I just don't trust that you guys are like, you're actually your budget's this much. And if it actually was, the accountant would be fired, because that's the accountant's job. Well, and so like, and we're talking about death.
And what's it's so much more serious, but what's so ugly about it is these officers, anybody who's a public servant, says that they will protect and serve, yet they also say from the enemy within and the enemy without. And the thing is, that when they start doing this, they become the enemy within that they are swearing they'll protect us from.
And it's so wild because they get mad at me because I'm in a lot of closed doors meetings with them, right? And I've been, we are now, because of, you can kind of tell, I have a certain level of like chip on my shoulder about some of these interactions. I've never impeded on an investigation.
Of course not.
I've only asked questions. I have utmost respect for the law, but I do have a certain amount of, I always believe authority should be questioned, because we constantly need to question, evaluate, and discuss what's authority doing, because we have to make sure that we keep each other in check.
We have to protect ourselves from our government, because it is our government that we created. So we better make sure it's on its toes.
And so we are now trespassers in this community. And the way that they've gotten that done is that HACLA, the Housing Authority of Los Angeles, is deeming us trespassing on their property being directed by LAPD. So LAPD went to HACLA and said,
Wow.
we want to make sure that these two people can't come here anymore, because
Get rid of
why?
these
We're
troublemakers.
seeing too much. And
Yeah.
they were crazy enough in
Can
a
I stop
closed,
you and ask you a
yeah,
question? I want to completely validate what you said. So
sure.
this police officer is expressing the view that maybe people are making up funerals so that they can party and get away with it and not be arrested when they party, which it's still illegal no matter what,
Sure. Yeah. Either
under
way,
those
either way.
circumstances. Either way. So the specifics, I think you're talking about a specific circumstance. Are you, do you have absolute evidence or personal experience that it was a funeral?
Oh,
That
absolutely.
that
Yes.
it wasn't what the police said it was?
100%. Yes. 100%.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
There's literally a death certificate attached to the family that was housing
Oh,
that engagement.
wow. Okay, thank you. I
Now,
just wanted to make sure we had that. So you're not just some young white guy who's having a coming of age experience and believing everything you hear. This is what you're actually personally experiencing and witnessing.
well, and that's where what's interesting about this is like, I am totally some white guy, right?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
I'm and what's weird about it is, like, the cops will be like, well, you don't know everything that's going on here, so why do you care so much? Or like, it's not your problem, get out of here. Or they'll like say like, you don't even know what's going on, so you don't have a say in this. And this is my only perspective I have. I come from a community that has been protected and served well by the police. I come from a
Mm,
place where 911 was a saving grace.
yeah.
One of the biggest blessings that you have in America is 911. Not every country
Mhm.
has that, right? Where an ambulance, a fire truck, and police come and say,
Mhm.
let me protect you, let me house you, let me take you to safety, let me protect the thing that you've built your whole livelihood on, let me make sure that your house doesn't burn. These resources are some of the craziest God-giving blessings that could ever happen. And I'm used to that. And so when I see this, I go, yeah, I get it that I'm not a young Black man that's experienced this. I'm telling you that this, what I'm seeing here, doesn't look like anything that I grew up with. This is what
Mhm.
every conservative, if they ever saw this on their block,
Right.
they would be
Right.
screaming, this is Nazi Germany. This is a
Oh,
dictatorship.
yeah.
This is, they would,
Mhm.
if it was Biden in office, they'd be screaming, this is Joe Biden, right? So this is such a conservative issue to me. These are rights of individual being infringed upon, to not even let them step out the door without questioning. And
Mhm.
so I know one thing, I can't solve this problem. I'm not like able to like have any interaction to make sure that this doesn't happen. I realize this is something that's historic, that's happened forever. And so I'm just like, I'm just so devastated that of all the conversations we've had historically about this, the fact that this is still the way it is. And so I think
Yeah.
anybody in America, left or right, white or Black or brown or anybody, if they saw this, they would go, dude, this isn't like, I'm proud of America. I love America. I think that
Mhm.
America is like one of the coolest things that's ever happened on this earth. But I am disgusted by this version of it. And now I don't look at any of this as like, I look at this as a human condition, which is authority unchecked can be really, really
Mhm.
dangerous.
And it's our job to check it because
Yeah.
it's the authority that we put there and that
Mhm.
we advocate. And it makes, it's understandable when you get communities that are always well served, that they don't understand that other communities aren't well served. And I think the role that you play and are playing even in this conversation is, no, you're not a young Black guy and you'll never know what that means. but you can be a voice, you can be a bridge between
Right.
that young Black guy and that white community that has no idea. It is unbelievable to them until they see it.
And what's weird is it's like this whole thing's made me more conservative, actually, in the sense
Mm,
that I'm like, the government can't fix this thing. Like, only people can fix this. And we are the government. So like
mhm,
we do have to like the only way out of, I think, where we are, even with some of the educational gaps and the programming gaps, is more people stepping up. And instead of engaging always in politics to be able to change things, just like, if you don't have to be a millionaire or billionaire to change the way that your community has impact. You can do it yourself. And like 2 or 3 people with passion can do like a pretty good amount of damage. You're not
mhm.
like, everyone has to stop about thinking about like, we're going to save the world. Like, just go impact like 1 or 2 individuals' lives once a month. And you're doing way, way, way more than most.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
if
yeah.
we think that we can like pass our empathy to the government and they're going to do it on our behalf, it's never going to happen. And so that's where I think we're kind of
Mhm.
flipped, where I'm like, I agree with a lot of the social causes of the left. I still believe in like, you in kind of like, you got to pick it up by your own bootstraps of the right to actually get this thing done.
The first time I came across that so incredibly illustrated was when I was the mayor of my town, and we had this wonderful little community garden. And we wanted to actually take the lot because it was in a park. We wanted to take the lot and a make it into a housing development. The next door neighbors didn't like it at all because they had that fear that people always have, that you're going to put poor people next to them. And so what they did, though, was that the wealthy neighbor bought the lot and made it and kept it exactly what it was. So there's this beautiful little community garden that's now privately run and still used by the community. And it's flourished, and it's so much better than when the city ran it, because we had all kinds of rules and regulations and cost restrictions and and time restrictions. It was 9 to 5, but this is people who are passionate about having a little community garden that are doing it themselves and doing it much, much better than we ever could
Right.
have. Now, we didn't get the affordable housing there, but it's, for me, and of course they hate me because I was advocating for the affordable housing, and so I am a villain, but but and I mean, to this point that they practically spit on me when they see me in the park, which again is probably not the way we want to be running our government, by the people, for the people, of the people. But I just love how wonderful this little garden is now. It's amazing, and
Yeah.
it was done privately and done so much better than we could do it as a
So they
city.
they see you as like the wild lefty over in this space.
I don't think it's even a political thing. I think they see me as the person who is taking away their community garden. She doesn't like community gardens. And in fact, we were looking at a number of other alternatives for community gardens that could have been as, as good or better. But they saw me as the ogre who was taking away their beautiful garden, who hated gardens, who wanted to destroy the gardens.
What's so funny too is people not letting individuals, like, we always meet everyone with like the words that I'm saying today are like an ultimate conclusion, right? Like, maybe I
Right.
like run for mayor on something like 30 years from now, and everybody would point back to the conversation we're having today and be like, no, this is what LJ said when he was
He said
30,
the police were corrupt.
when
Yeah,
he's
he
and when he
can't
was
be the mayor.
34 years old.
Mhm,
This is his conclusion.
mhm,
Stop. I don't want anybody that ever hears my voice to think that I've come to ultimate conclusions. I'm still trying to
mhm.
figure out what existence on earth is. I'm a Christian, but like every day I'm like, this is crazy. This is wild being out here. So if I haven't had ultimate conclusion of exactly what like life on earth is, stop holding me to an ultimate conclusion of like where I am with particular things like a garden. Like, that was your
Mhm.
stream of consciousness. where you're going,
Mhm.
oh, I'm not able to see all the way through that this garden is going to work as well today as it is when it was in your mind, what, 2 years ago, right? So now you can walk around that garden and go, and even giving you some grace to yourself by going, this worked out really well.
Oh, it was wonderful. Yeah,
Like,
it was a
what a
wonderful
blessing.
conclusion. And the reason it was a wonderful conclusion is because it was a conclusion that came from, it was the power of the people. That's what the people wanted. That's what they advocated for. That's what they pushed for. That's what they fought for. And that's what they got. And that's what they should have gotten. It didn't matter what the city thought we could do with that space. It did, and we had pressure too to create affordable housing, because if we don't create enough as a city, then we don't get federal funding. It's that same conundrum. And so there was pressure on the city, and we were trying to meet that requirement that we needed to meet. And I know, and a true concern about affordable housing too. But at
And
the end of the day, in fact, democracy won. The people won, and they did a great job. And I have no problem with that. My only problem is to be so sad that they can't see beyond hating me.
well, and what's so
Just,
funny too is
yeah.
like sometimes little quarrels make the best out of people too. So like
Mm,
when you as the mayor at the time were like, you were trying to come up with a creative solution to be able to provide a affordable household in a good affluent neighborhood. So you were looking,
mm.
right? Am I looking at that wrong?
Not entirely good affluent. We are actually have historically been the poorest city in the county.
Okay.
And I'd say 50 to 60% of our residents live in rented accommodation.
Okay.
And so we are not, and we lean just a little bit Democrat, um, probably 60,
Is
40,
but rented not,
maybe, yeah.
what percentage of your population is government subsidized?
I don't actually know the answer to that. I do not know, but there's some. I know there's some, obviously, but I don't know. I should know the answer to that. I don't know.
What a
I could know,
blessing
but
for
I
you to
don't
be,
remember.
what a blessing
Yeah.
for you to be able to actually like say, I don't know. Like that's such a
Yeah.
strong statement.
Right.
Like,
Right.
thank you for that.
Yeah.
It's like,
What it
I'm not
means.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Not knowing is probably a good thing. It means that we aren't prejudging people because they're government subsidized.
And just being willing to like say, I don't know yet. I'm not sure. I just, and so that's, and there's always levels of this, right? Like the difference between some communities would be judged on how much they're like, how much is government subsidized. Some communities would be like, oh, well, a renting base of individual is like not as affluent, where it's like as a homeowner it is. So it's like that's where the funny
Yeah.
elements of like the
Hmm.
levels to like things are, because I'm sure there's areas of LA that are like literally 100%
100%.
rented,
Yeah.
and then like
Yes.
probably 40 to 50% government subsidized when you zero in
Hmm.
on a microscope. um
So tell me, so where are you guys now? So the police have decided that you're personas non grata,
sure, I like the way
which
that sounds.
I shouldn't speak Latin, probably. I should probably define that or stop cussing. But anyway, I guess we know what that means. So the police don't like you, so they've kicked you out. So now what's happening?
So now I'm still continuing with my entrepreneurship program. And so I'm housing all of that through Zoom. And so I'm meeting with people, a little bit more flexibility of schedule now for them to be able to meet me when, and what time works for them. So doing all of that literally from the desk that I'm sitting in. Elof
Oh,
is,
but you can't see the kids anymore. You can't interact with the kids anymore
well, we're still trying to figure out what's the best way
and the
to be able to do
families.
that. And it's still gonna happen. I'm gonna continue with a boys club with with a community member. We were gonna meet twice a week, and so we'll continue to do that. And like we're picking the kids up a lot. So we've been, because we can't plant ourselves there. We pick them up. And so so this weekend, myself and my fiance, we both drove separate cars, drove in the community. I took the boys downtown. She took the girls to, I think, an event in Inglewood. So we kind of divided and conquered and had a boys and girls day at the same time. And that's also one of the ways that when we were there, we realized that it's really nice to give the kids a break by like just letting them like experience Los Angeles County as a whole. And so we're trying to be more just focused on that for the moment. We want to build a much stronger impression that we are individuals that will continue to fight for these kids' rights and fight for change in this space. So the LAPD probably looks at us right now as people that have backed down and are scared of them and have succumbed to their pressure. But what we're really doing is preparing ourselves for more conversation with them, with more receipts, with more community members that have had many more similar actions. Our interaction is far from unique, from unique. I am, and when it comes to a lot of individuals that have lived in this environment, my discomfort that the Housing Authority of Los Angeles and the Los Angeles Police Department have caused me is this. To the discomfort that these kids have felt. And so we continue to remind ourselves of like, we have to apply more pressure and probably feel more pressure. And it is 1/100th of the pressure that a 12-year-old young boy has right now that is sleeping and is waiting to wake up, or getting pressured right now at about 7 p.m. by this organization that isn't working in the best interest of all of us collectively. And that's what it's about. Like, it's about getting everybody to realize same team. I'm on a team of peace and hope, and our organization is called Love Wins. Even though the police would think I'm like prickly, they'd be like, that LJ is a prickly feller, right? Like, he always has something to say and he seems like he has a chip on his shoulder. And that's because I just think that there's different interactions with authority that like wasn't meant for this world. And like, authority should not be putting pressure on individuals that are trying to just live their life. I believe that structure matters and that it can create peace. But there's always ebbs and flows to how to be able to do that best. And I think that we have an abundance of pressure that is unlawful and misguided and unfortunately evil that's happening within the housing projects right now.
So it occurs to me, I know that often, I know that a lot of the organizations that work there will be nonprofits. And I also know that probably a good number of them are faith-based. So
yeah,
it occurs to me that if you were a religious group or a church group, because what you're doing with these kids is very similar to the kinds of things that I saw growing up that churches did with kids. And it empowered the kids and it invested in the kids. And so if you happen to be a church, they couldn't kick you out, could they?
I don't know.
Could they kick you out of the park? It's an
And
interesting
I mean, honestly,
thought, isn't
like,
it?
what's interesting is they just can't kick us out.
Of course, you're
because
different faiths, you and your fiance.
Yeah, I'm Christian and she is Muslim. And so, but we're very faith oriented, like God is light and God is love, right? Like, that's real. And I think that, I think we don't really actually understand the true level of depth that statement really is until thereafter, like until the afterlife. Do we really know what that means as far as like God is love and God is light? Like, I think there's so much of the omnipotence involved in that statement, in the way that I think we're going to be able to kind of like see more colors and feel more feelings and realize what that was. And so when we're saying love wins, it's deeply rooted in
faith.
God's going to win this thing. Love's going to win. Like, it will prevail. It's in all of this thing, and it's the only way through disaster is through love. But love has an interesting love will get prickly if it's in encountering things that are darkness, right? Because if love is light and God is love, like when
You got to
darkness
stand up to it.
when darkness shows up, the light wins in darkness every time.
So when we're talking about corruption and my focus on this podcast is not just about corruption, but it's about what everyday people do, where they are, where they live, to be involved in their community and to be involved in their government, because it is our government and the buck stops with us. So, but going back to the theme of corruption, is it just in the way you're seeing policing happening and assumptions people are making, or were there other areas that are a problem?
Really, where bigger problems really exist also, and more importantly, and before we leave policing, I know also most of the CSP officers, the Community Safety Partnership, and I said there's only 12 of them. There's some good ones.
Of course.
You know what I mean? So like there is good officers in there with good intentions, but like the system doesn't quite let them be good or like interact with negative officers and just deal with it because of the hierarchy stuff. So before we leave off of that, it's like that's also important, where it's like there's still good people that get stuck in like kind of bad systems, but then whenever we get like caught into a system and people are like, well, I can't do anything, it's the system. It's like, no, people built the system. I will never stand for something where people are like, well, it's the system. Stop it. We built it. We can change it. Everything we can change. Everything. There's like nothing on earth that a human hasn't created. And if they haven't created it, it's this God willing stuff. And that's usually the stuff that doesn't impede on our life, other than tornadoes and hurricanes.
Yeah.
And so if it's not a tornado and hurricane,
rise. Yeah.
That's the only time that you say can't fix it. Tornadoes and hurricanes can't fix it. I'll take that. If outside of that, stop it. We can fix it. So, but programming budgets, there's so many dollars. Like again, the poorest and youngest housing project in Los Angeles County. So when the $1 trillion warfare happened over the top with Democrats, and like how many people talked about Colin Kaepernick taking a knee, right? Everybody knows that it's synonymous. Colin Kaepernick will forever be in the folklore of what police have done to Black and brown communities. Now, every dinner table had this conversation, and every business put up a black box. Every business said, we are going to donate this much funds. We are going to care. We are going to give back. We are here in this fight. We stand in the middle of this injustice. Okay, so I'm in the poorest and youngest housing project in LA County. There's only 14 of them. Where's the money? Where is the programming? How has it not hit the ground? Like literally, it would be as if reporters on the radio are saying, there's 100% chance of rain. And I'm sitting in the spot where the rain's supposed to fall, and there's not a drop. So when that stuff's circulating, 100% chance of rain. I mean, every organization you could ever imagine came out, Nike and thereafter down, said, we are going to stand in the middle of this injustice. How not $1 hit the poorest and youngest housing project? Like when we're talking like top 5 poorest and youngest housing projects in America, this is on that list. There's the Marcy projects in New York City. There's the kind of new organization of Cabrini Green in Chicago. The largest housing project in Los Angeles County is the Nickerson, which is one next door neighbor. And then like, we're in it. We're in like the next door neighbor, the largest housing project west of the Mississippi. They're not getting any of these funds either.
So and I'm not trying to simplify a really tough problem, but there is a mechanism called a public records request. And you can ask. The thing is, I don't know who you ask, but you might. You can ask. You can say, you can ask for that information. You can say how much, how many funds were allocated and how many made it, and let me see the budget. And it's a huge project, and it's a really big thing when you're talking about LA County. But it is possible to get that information.
I think that unfortunately sometimes I look at life in the idea of like documentaries, and I'm like, I know that like in 10 years the documentary on allocation of funds after this thing is gonna be a chaotic one, because what you're saying is like there, and maybe we need to be part of the organization that helps like track this down, but I can just be here as like a person who's been on the ground, not for very long, only for 2 years. But it also was like the 2 years right after the chaos, and going, not a drop fell. Like, honestly, certainly we're not the only individuals in this space, right? But like on a daily basis, within the year and a half that we were on the ground daily, a handful, like sometimes I was the only person down there, but sometimes I was like, there's kind of like I would say 5 to 10 individuals that are like strategically working daily in that space that was making it happen, with no governmental financing at all, encountering the most impactful 10.
So what you're really saying is, now I'm coming at this, I am more liberal than you are, probably, maybe. I don't know.
Sure.
Maybe I'm not. Maybe maybe an old liberal is a young conservative. I'm not sure, but
no, I think you're more liberal than me. I guarantee it.
I think I lean more Democrat. So although probably just over the other side of the middle, not way left, but in some things. But so what you're really saying is, it's one thing for us to vote in all these things, and it's even for the organizations and the companies to give money. But what really needs to happen is we need to get off our backsides and go see what it's really about.
Yeah. The money never fell, but then 2,
the money fell. The money fell. The question is, where did the money fall?
Yeah. I can tell you that the one organization that is their weekly cash wise is honestly only Amazon. So Amazon brings food every week. And so, and it's distributed through the volunteers in the community there that distribute that food. But
and it works. It's actually really working.
Yeah, it's great. It's honestly like it's such a great farmer's market. But all the structural entities of how to make that happen with the refrigerator and that infrastructure, that was all privately financed. And funny enough, the people that did the most amount of money givings in order to change to beautify the center was the Kardashians.
Oh, wow.
So now what's so funny is like, so when you think of like impact of like who gives the most, you would go, okay, obviously like Amazon is the devil. Like Amazon doesn't give anything. Amazon's the only like real like weekly giver in that space. A big injection of capital, which I think happened like between the last like 4 and 5 years to be able to update the center, was the Kardashians, who would be like number 3 on the list of who would never care. So it's just funny.
You would make the assumption they would be number 3 on the list.
So what's so funny to me, and like literally, like I'm telling you, $20 a year from people would help. If the tax base of the LA County all said like, we want to care and give. If the tax base, each individual just said like, I'll do $20 a year for like a community, game changing. with the
And
amount
don't
of
give
people
it to the government, give it to the nonprofits that can actually make it
that are
happen.
actually on the ground. But it's hard to figure out who does it right, because there also is
It
nonprofits that
is.
don't. There's corruption in nonprofits.
Yeah, yeah,
It gets
there's a
dirty
lot of
too.
corruption. Yeah. Mhm.
But so of the checklist of if we went down on Hollywood Boulevard and we said, what's the worst companies in America? Oh, Amazon, number one. They're giving. What's like some of the worst celebrities that would obviously not give to a cause? Kardashians, right? So how is it that the top two, the number one holders probably on both of those lists, company and people, how are those the only things, the only entities that have really provided? And then I think it's funny, some other celebrities
Where
that
did
like
all the tax dollars go? Yeah.
some of the other celebrities that like I know provide with that organization are like the Chain Smokers, which is a DJ group. Logan Paul is always sending clothes down there,
Mhm.
and Justin Bieber is like sending stuff down there.
Wow.
So these are all the people that you would say they for sure don't care.
Mhm.
And
And you know
those are
what's
the
really cool about that is you're talking about, here's who I am, here's where I am, here's what I can give. Same with your fiance. Here's my skill set, and here's my empathy, and here's where I can give, and I'm going to do it. The Kardashians did the same. They said, here's what we've got, and we're going to make it count.
right.
Justin did the same. And Amazon is doing the same. They're saying, here's my skill set, here are my gifts, here's how I'm going to help.
Right. Because like what they kind of do is with a lot of these groups, like they're kind of just giving like excess, right? So like you can
Mhm.
kind of tell with like the Amazon stuff, like it's just like excess food that they've been able to sort and provide. It's not expired.
That's
Like
wonderful.
it's
That's
just
cool.
it's perfectly in like that time frame where you're like, oh, this is probably like, because we don't always know what we're getting, but then we get it,
Mhm.
and it's always like it's fresh produce, fresh meats, like
Yeah,
yogurts
because
and milk.
they could put it in the landfill.
Yes.
They
So
could
like
just fill up the landfill and cost us all more money and destroy the environment, says the left winger.
it,
And they're
it,
not.
exactly.
That's
So like so
great.
they do that, and then like and honestly, the celebrities like outside the Kardashians, it seemed like they give some cash to be able to make improvements, but
Mhm.
like the Logan Pauls, the Kardashians still, and then like Bieber, what you can I can tell that they give, it doesn't, it's not as like monetary givings, it's just like extra clothes and extra furniture and things that they
Mhm.
must have gotten like on that monthly basis
Mhm.
will come down kind of in like bulk loads, and so then we can like disperse out to the kids,
Mhm.
and they love it because they love
Wow.
to know where it's from. So it's like those are
Oh,
the things.
yeah.
So it's just so, and what I want people to know is like if you could honestly just start trying to carve out like 2 hours a month to be able to just serve locally. You don't have to always go to like the poorest or the youngest
Mhm.
or all like even a housing project, just like going to serve at a church or going to serve at a community space. Most people, they think that like in order to like volunteer, you have to call the spot and say, do you need anybody extra today? Yes. Now, do they need anybody extra on Easter, Christmas, or Thanksgiving? Probably not. Most of
Hmm.
the time, like those are pretty overserved spaces. Try a Monday morning in September. Try a
Yeah.
random Thursday in July. Those are the days that nonprofits are waiting for you to show up. You don't need to call to go. They are structurally waiting and praying or hoping that a few more bodies and excited people show up that day to make it
Angels.
happen.
I always think of them as angels because you're in a seemingly almost impossible situation, and then an angel shows up, and it may be in the form of your grandma
Yeah.
or your friend or a neighbor.
And serve somewhere that's like
Yeah.
obviously like serve
Mhm.
somewhere that's convenient to you as well. You know,
Yeah. Well,
serve
you've
somewhere
got
that's
serve where you live, serve
mhm,
where you are. That if you just do that, it's huge.
huge. It's dramatic of what we could all
Mhm.
do. And collectively, we would have we would all be able to care way less of who was the president if
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
just woke up once a month for 2 hours and just said, where could I provide some time and structurally
Mm.
build that into your lifestyle and in your children's lifestyle? You wouldn't need to care who the president is, because
Yeah.
you would realize that you'd be like, you know what, in my sphere, I'm doing the best I can.
Yes. And my son works for a very large company, and they are able to give, how much is it? I think it's, trying to remember what it is. I think it's a day a month that he's able to go serve in any way that he chooses, as long as it's a legitimate charity, or a legitimate service, but he's able to go serve. So sometimes he gleans and helps with food banks, and he's young, so he goes out and picks fruit and things like that he can do. Sometimes he goes and he clears trails in the back country.
Yeah.
But it's an amazing thing that this company gives their very expensive employees an opportunity to one day a month be paid to provide a public service.
Yeah, it's such a blessing when that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's along the Amazon type model. It's when companies have the cash flow and the profits to do something like that. Not a lot of small companies do it on a much smaller scale. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's important.
So what's the takeaway, LJ? What's your takeaway from all this? So 2 years ago, your life radically changed, and you decided you'd do something constructive, and you learned a whole bunch of stuff you never knew. It was a real cultural awakening, I'm sure, an adventure for both you and your fiance.
Sure.
So what's your takeaway? What are your top 3 takeaways from from the last 2 years?
I would say create the change that you care about, and realize that you can create impact. You're going to feel much more peace with your direction, with our collective community's direction, and with your life's direction if you take some of that into your own hands. Stop believing that the thing that's on your heart should be something that everybody else is supposed to deal with and care about. So, like, let's say someone cares deeply about climate change and they're dedicating their whole life to that. And I'm like saying, okay, I want to impact and positively impact the lives in Imperial Quartz Watts. That's where we need to be. Like, so politically, I think we've got too much on the spectrum of saying, because I care so much about policing, someone else should go do that. No, do it. Like, do it yourself. And like, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't promote the issue. Like, I'm here promoting the issue, saying, if you care about it, this is how you could maybe impact it too. But I hope so deeply that individuals that care so much about things that are happening, they don't get up to like what I would call heaven one day and say, God, why didn't you send anybody that cared about cats? He's like, well, I thought you cared about cats. I thought you were, why didn't you send someone that would dedicate their life to change the scenario for cats? I did. It was you. You just didn't do it. You just kept on voting it in. You kept on tweeting about it. You even thought Donald Trump was supposed to do it. You even thought Joe Biden was supposed to do it. But when
you cared and you cared and you cared, but what did you do?
But you didn't. You were supposed to be the change that so believe what's on your heart. Believe the thing that's on your heart, but take it, internalize it, and go, maybe I'm supposed to change it. Now, stop. But then also, once it's there, stop thinking that you're like some God sent angel all the time, and just work. Like, just do it. Because God might have sent you in that direction, but like, stop believing you're going to always change the world over it, and just work through it as a human and say, I can only do what I have in my capacity, which is one-on-one. And I really get so annoyed by like nonprofits that say our mission is to change the world. Your mission is to do nothing. Your mission isn't going to change no one's life. You have to go one-on-one in order to do anything. It's the only way that things are actually going to have incremental change, because I believe so deeply in butterfly effects. So I do think that you can change the world through changing one life, because that creates butterfly effects. But just thinking to always like I think we think too broad sometimes, and it ends up you're trying to do like all these things, and before you know it, you did nothing. So
Wow.
I don't know if that's really a synopsis. It's probably confusing, but that's who I am.
Well, that's great. Thank you. I love talking with you. I guess we'll have a completely different podcast next time, I think, because I'm hoping your dad will come on and tell us about this ancient relative of yours, this ancestor of yours who set about to change Great Britain and the United States, and a big boat that couldn't sink got in the way.
Yep, that's right.
I'm looking forward to hearing. Maybe you come by this honestly, LJ. Maybe there's that crusading spirit is in your DNA.
There's maybe some sort of chip on my shoulder that's been there generationally. So we
You
don't know.
inherited a chip. Oh, well, I guess with that, we'd better sign off. Thank you so much, LJ, for your time tonight.
Thank you so much for having me on, and God bless you all. I hope to see you soon.
Thanks.